That always sounds so serious.
Yeah,
It's
frightening.
a good legal warning.
Yes, it is. So I will go ahead and get started. Actually, Dave, I'm going to go ahead and make you a co-host as well. And
Sure.
if you can
Let people in if anyone else comes.
Yes, if you can monitor the waiting room
Yep,
for me
happy to.
and let anybody else in, that would be fantastic. All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. My name is Abby Enlin, and I'm the Executive Director for the Environmental Education Association of Illinois. And we are here today to discuss the environmental literacy for Illinois, the Environmental Literacy Plan for Illinois, a framework, EL4IL, as it is being affectionately referred to as. So the plan for today, we'll do some quick introductions since we are a pretty small group. I think it's fun just to know who's in the room. We're going to go through what got us here, the accomplishments that we saw in 2020. I'll do a quick overview of the EL4IL, the 2021 version. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to dig into that and read it. Then I'm going to turn things over to Dave for our feedback questions. At that point, I will stop the recording so that we can speak freely about the document and really share out exactly what we're thinking and feeling without hesitation. And then we will move into next steps and kind of some of the exciting things that are coming up for this plan, for this document. Okay, so if we can just go around, feel free to unmute yourself. We're going to just do a quick name, your affiliation, maybe where in the state you're located or who you're working with. And then if you are familiar with any of the previous Illinois environmental literacy plans, kind of prior to this version that we are pushing out widely, did you have any acknowledgement or not acknowledgement, any awareness of those previous plans? So I will go ahead and I'll actually start with Dave Chase, who's joining us today as our facilitator to help me with this program. But Dave, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Glad to be with you tonight. Dave Chase. I'm speaking to you from up on the coast of Maine, where I live. And my history is I've spent about the first 25 years of my career in education and environmental education, and about the last 15 years as a consultant working with educational and environmental ed organizations around the country. And was lucky enough to connect with Abby and be invited to help out with some pieces as you put together this new iteration of the literacy plan for Illinois. So I'm glad to be here and looking forward to chatting with you about this tonight. Thanks.
All right, I will pass it over to Mary. She's next on my screen.
Okay, I'm Mary Rice, and I've been involved in EL4IL for the last 4 versions, I think, as you well know, along with Nan and Megan. I'm not affiliated with anybody anymore, although I have to say I just left Spring Valley and I got to do my rock camp this week and last week. Got all teary-eyed today because it's 2 days until I leave again. Somebody said it's just like opening the wound. I said, yeah, you better believe it. So I'm anxious to see this new plan take root.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I will turn it over to Nan.
Hi, I'm Nan Buckard. I'm with the Lake County Forest Preserve in Northern Illinois and have been involved in all the versions of EL4IL except this one.
Awesome. Megan, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Megan Gavin from the US EPA in Chicago. I'm the environmental education coordinator there, and I dip in and out of the education associations, but I am aware of past literacy plans, and I do think that this would be something to certainly share with other environmental ed associations in the Midwest, so then they can kind of share information or just see where everybody is. So I'm excited that you're doing this. Very excited.
Awesome, thanks. And Katie, last but not least.
Hi, sorry. Hi, I'm Katie Narwald. I am I am the founder and managing director of Go Green Illinois Schools. I'm also a teacher at a local school here, and am the outdoor classroom coordinator and sustainability coordinator for that district. So just have done some work with schools in environmental literacy, and looking forward to learning more about this.
Awesome, thank you.
Katie, what district?
38.
And where is that?
It's in Kenilworth, small
Okay,
K8 building.
great.
And we
Okay,
just
Yep.
had one more person enter the room.
fantastic. Was that Jessica?
Yes. Mhm.
Welcome, Jessica. We're doing quick introductions. If you just want to share your name and affiliation, and if you are aware of any of the previous environmental literacy plans for Illinois. Can't quite hear you. You were breaking up a bit there.
What?
Well, Jessica, if you want to share your introduction in the chat, or maybe we can catch back up with you in a bit, but I will get us going because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for the feedback part of this, which is the important part of what we're here to do today. But just real quickly, I wanted to share what got us here. So in December of 2019, the Environmental Education Association of Illinois, in partnership with the Illinois EPA, the Illinois State Board of Education, Chicago Wilderness, and the Field Museum, along with the Forest Preserve District of oh my gosh, I'm just totally blanking. It's Jessica Prince's Forest Preserve District, which I'm totally blanking on now.
County.
Yes, thank you. We all worked together and secured a large grant from the Pisces Foundation to delve into this work. And the plan originally had been to create a leadership summit where we would bring together a large group of folks that, you know, kind of run the big major organizations, major institutions that are doing environmental education in Illinois, bring them all up to Chicago and have a 3-day summit to really dive into environmental literacy and to look at past plans, to look at where our state stands on issues of justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, and how can we move our field forward in those areas in a better way. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and so we had to completely throw out that amazing plan that we had devised, and we moved it all into virtual format. And so in August of 2020, we had about 50 organizations that participated in some diversity, equity, and inclusion training hosted by Cream City Conservation. August Ball out of Milwaukee was our facilitator for those events. And then we hosted online listening sessions that were supposed to replicate kind of the networking feedback, sort of like what we're doing today, focus group type setting. And Dave Chase facilitated those for us to really dive into the previous version of the EL4IL and where we saw that document moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit about the outcomes of those in a minute. The writing committee then convened in the fall of winter 2020 and 2021. So from all the people that attended all of those events, we kind of created this massive 19-person writing committee. And they broke down the EL4IL into chapters and sections and kind of each tackled one of those sections. A small writing committee made up of myself, Mary Rice, and Ellen Woodward from the Field Museum got together and kind of conducted a rewrite. We took all of those chapters and put them together, got feedback from that larger writing committee, and then rewrote that document. We then sent that document out to a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Accessibility Committee that was convened to review the document from the local perspective on those issues. So this was a group of folks, mostly out of the Chicago area, from the Chicago Environmental Educators Organization and environmentalists of color, that reviewed the document and gave a lot of input, kind of said, no, you can't say this. Yes, we'd like to see this in here. They wrote some of the sections for us and did a lot of that work for us. We've also hired a Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility consultant that is right now reviewing the document for us. She is a woman out of the University of Oregon who happens to be she serves on the advisory committee for the North American Association for Environmental Education and is the moderator of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion EE Pro group on NAAE's website. So she's very, very entrenched in this work. And recently I had the privilege of working with her on rewriting the NAAEE's affiliate network goals. And she was just a really good linguist, a really good, kind of looking at the words and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so we've hired her to really dig into EL4IL, looking specifically at those issues again. And are we really placing them at the forefront, giving them good consideration in how we move the field forward? And that brings us to June 2020, where we are looking to get public feedback on what we have spent all of this time writing. So from those listening sessions that we hosted last fall, some really key takeaways came out. And the first one was a complete lack of awareness that the state even had an environmental literacy plan. Most people didn't even know that it existed or what the point of it was, what it was meant to do. So that was a real kind of, oh man, that really stinks sort of moment for many of us that, really, I know many of you in this room worked really hard on those plans, and to hear that a lot of these folks didn't even know they existed was a pretty hard pill to swallow. A lot of the second biggest thing, and this one really struck me very strongly because I have a lot of educational background in environmental education, was that a lot of people didn't even know what environmental literacy meant. Like, what does that mean? What are we talking about? And so clarity of what that term truly means was lacking in those previous plans, and seemed to be really lacking in the field in general. And the concept that environmental literacy is achieved in very different ways throughout Illinois was kind of a key concept that came out. Issues involved in being environmentally literate have become more increasingly diverse. So you're talking about food insecurity and climate change and civic action, and there's all kinds of different issues now involved with being environmentally literate that maybe weren't around even just a few years ago. Diversity, equity, and inclusion need to be interwoven into every aspect of creating the plan. So they really wanted from the folks that were writing it, to the folks that were reading it and reviewing it, to the content within the plan, for these issues to be interwoven in all of those aspects. And then including input from both formal and non-formal educators was really important. The one big takeaway you can see there in bold on the side of the screen is that what was needed, the committee really felt like, was a guiding document that presents the essential elements needed to achieve environmental literacy, and then possible steps to get there. So they really did not want to see another very prescriptive plan of these are the goals we need to accomplish, this is what we need to do, and this is exactly how an educator does these things, X, Y, and Z. It was more, they wanted a really clear grasp of what environmental literacy is, what that looks like in Illinois, and what is out there to help communities, educators, and organizations achieve or work toward or advance environmental literacy within their own institutions. So again, just pretty quickly, an overview of what has developed in this new EL4IL 2021. The first chapter is dedicated just to that defining of environmental literacy. And this took a lot of work. Coming up with this definition was significantly harder than I had anticipated. I honestly really thought we would just kind of cobble together definitions, that were already out there, but the committee really dove in, and we had a lot of back and forth, and then our small writing committee revised and rethought and added more information to that. And then we decided that we really wanted like tenets of environmental literacy. Like, what are the key takeaways, the key components that people really need to be aware of that are involved with being an environmentally literate person. So that's what you're going to find in chapter 1. Chapter 2 is our justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility chapter. So this is really where that committee stepped in and wrote a lot of this content for us. It has some key definitions, which is to help lay the groundwork of what are we talking about when we throw around these, these terms, making sure everyone in the field is on the same page when you're talking about these issues as they relate specifically to our work in environmental education. And then exactly what environmental justice issues we're facing here in Illinois. So we have some of that information in there as well. Chapter 3 is our approaches for advancing environmental education or environmental literacy here in Illinois. So culturally and age appropriate approaches, and then implementation approaches. So these are things like outdoor classrooms or environmental action civics, agriculture education. So we're touching on a lot of that kind of implementation information in this chapter. I also want to point out that we use the word approaches very intentionally. Historically, this has been called best practices, implementation best practices, or best practices for utilizing resources, those kinds of words. And what we've come to find out just in conversation as this process has gone on is that what might be a best practice for me at my facility might not be a best practice or a best way to implement a program in another facility. And so labeling something as the best kind of limits right there the conversation and puts something above something else. And so we're just kind of trying to be more general and calling them all approaches. Chapter 4 is about building partnerships. Another key thing that came out of these conversations is that you cannot advance environmental literacy in a bubble. As a formal educator, you can't do it on your own. You need to lean on the non-formal facilities and the resources that the state has available to you. And so really building those partnerships is a much easier way to advance our work and to increase environmental education in our schools and non-formal facilities. So we talk about the benefits, the examples, and the maintaining of those partnerships within this chapter. Chapter 5 is about evaluation of environmental literacy. So what to evaluate, how to evaluate, and then evaluation resources that are already out there. And then finally, chapter 6 is our resources chapter. There's just a brief overview. This chapter is kind of really a skeleton chapter at this point because it's just meant to point people to what will be coming, which is the environmental literacy resource database that will be built out. And I'll touch a bit more on that coming up a little bit later. But so this is just kind of to let people know that there's more help to be found through the EL4IL program. So a bit more about what we're anticipating to include in the EL4IL besides those 6 chapters that I mentioned. We're really trying to model this document after the NAAE's Guidelines for Excellence documents. They have several of these different versions of Guidelines for Excellence, K through 12, non-formal, materials, professional development, and community engagement. And within that document, they're formatted beautifully. They're very eye-catching, which we are going to be working towards this summer. But they also have standout sections that go beyond just the body of the actual document. So we're going to mirror that and create different sections that you'll see within the EL4IL in the coming months. So the first section, or the first style of sections that we're going to include, are further learning sections. And these sections will be to highlight statewide environmental education programs and resources that are available to all educators. So some of the resources that we've already chatted with about being highlighted in the EL4IL, for example, is the Illinois Green Alliance and their Green Ribbon Schools program, the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation and their Solar Wind and Solar Schools programs, Illinois Ag in the Classroom program that's run by the Illinois Farm Bureau. NAAE's Guidelines for Excellence will also be in there because that is a national program that is also available to all Illinois educators. The Illinois Entice program run by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and the Illinois EPA's variety of environmental education programs as well. Again, the focus for these further learning sections were truly statewide initiatives that all educators could really lean into for support and to increase their environmental literacy. We're going to also be working with several organizations to include exemplary programs that we will hold up as our case studies. So these will be programs in Illinois that are really doing exceptional work to advance environmental literacy in their communities. They might be formal educators working within their district or their school or their classroom to really enhance environmental literacy in some way for their students, or non-formal facilities that are going above and beyond your basic public programs to really do innovative new ideas for advancing environmental literacy. We have a couple ideas, and we did have a group that put together quite an elaborate list, but if you have any suggestions, feel free to put those in the chat box or email them to me directly. And again, I've got more information to share on this at a later date, but there are going to be some pretty amazing perks for being one of these case studies as we move into year 2 of this program. So it could be a really great way to get a boost for some of our amazing environmental education programs here in Illinois. And then finally, our our Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Committee drafted their considerations, as they called them. And they did ask for these to actually be included, you know, just as they were written by the committee within the document, because it provides them an opportunity to really share their perspective on some of these issues and to really call out some of the things that have maybe been ignored in the past. So we do have a couple of those that are included throughout the document, and those are actually already in there for folks to review and provide feedback on. And we're open to more of these being included as more ideas or issues arise. I imagine we potentially might have more of these from the hired consultant that we're working with as well. Okay, so that is my overview. Are there any questions before we move into the feedback portion? Are there any questions about the process of how we got here, or anything in general that I can share at this time? Wonderful.